Last year, I attended a low-key anime convention as a featured panelist. During the evening, I strolled into one of the room parties that was playing the anime classic Akira. I intended to stick around for a bit, as I always enjoy watching the film, but I ended up staying a bit later than usual because it's just that good. Every time I watch this film, I always come away with another perspective in the film's masterful means of epic storytelling. On this particular viewing, I took special note of the aspects of empathy being a component of arguing for humanity's survival, that the likes of the sacrificing Kaneda and the devoted Colonel are spared the wrath of Akira despite their actions that might have worsened the situation. Soon after the convention, I started digging around on YouTube for videos that furthered the discussion of Akira. Renegade Cut has a fascinating video on the religious overtones and how the film relates to post-war Japanese politics. Nerdwriter had a more technically intriguing video on the use of light in the film's decadent animation. Beyond Ghibli had a video that took note of the production and its legacy on the medium. These were all insightful videos that made me appreciate the picture all the more. And then there was this video. Oh, this will not do. Thankfully, this isn't CinemaSins, and this channel's Anime Sins series didn't last too long, but on the off chance that CinemaSins decides to one day make an Everything Wrong with Akira video, whenever that live-action Akira movie is finished, let's just nip this in the butt right now.
Kaneda jumpstarts the movie's soundtrack.
How is a musical transition a sin? This is a strong way to get the film moving, considering it takes a while before Kaneda makes it back to his bike and the CD he selected in the jukebox is played. Kaneda starts up his bike as the film cuts to the CD being selected and played, getting the movie up and running with a minor but notable build.
You wanna ride it, Tetsuo?
Johnny Young Bosch.
Yes, that is voice actor Johnny Young Bosch. What's your point? That he appears in a lot of anime? Granted, he was in quite a few titles in the 2000s, but around the time that he did Akira, he was still very new. In fact, this is only his third anime voiceover and his first voiceover in a feature film. Of course, this is all speculation on why this is a sin, because it's mere referencing. I don't know, maybe he just prefers the original dub actor of Cam Clark.
I love this opening shot of Neo Tokyo as much as the next animation fan. I really do. But even for a post-apocalyptic city 31 years after World War III, it looks garish and needlessly over-engineered. Did I just step into Batman and Robin?
Neo Tokyo is a towering cyberpunk dystopia. Their use of technology is lacking in terms of being used for the betterment of mankind, and instead for more frivolous expenses of commercial products and military weapons, a familiar world-building element of 1980s speculative science fiction. The city was not built logically after such a devastating event, made all the more clear by the council wasting money on an Olympic stadium to host the Olympic Games. The design of Neo Tokyo is not just there to look cool or accurately reflect a rebuild after World War III. It tells us about the world and the very themes of the film, to showcase how humanity has gone too far with its technology, and that it's doomed to topple over on its own excess when it doesn't learn from past mistakes. It's a very common display of a dystopian future perceived by the 1980s, the most notable example being Blade Runner, depicting a future LA that is garish, dirty, and excessive with technology. But yeah, I guess it kind of looks like Batman and Robin, except for the fact that those two films had much different architectural design and vastly different color palettes.
Yomiuri Giants.
Why are references sins? Especially when someone wearing a Japanese baseball cap with an actual Japanese baseball team design seems to make sense.
How is the military just noticing now that Nameless here has Takashi with him? And besides, he's the kid they're looking for. How would they not recognize Takashi?
It's established that the military in this scene is not primarily looking for Takashi. They're handling a protest and trying to block off areas where the protest would turn violent. They don't know it's Takashi because they're too far away to clearly see their faces. Hell, the firing squad doesn't even seem to connect that Nameless has a kid until they're ordered to stop shooting up the suspect.
We interrupt this production of Akira to bring you Road Warrior.
Who the f*** looks at this scene and thinks it's ripping off Road Warrior? Is Road Warrior the only movie you've seen with motorcycle gangs in it?
There's political unrest in Neo Tokyo, and while I'm aware everything was answered in the manga, we're never told what the cause of this unrest is.
Well, you would know if you bothered to pay attention to the protest, and one of the protesters is yelling out a repeal of tax reform. But is it really that much of a stretch to theorize that in Neo-Tokyo, a city of advertisements amid ridiculously towering structures coupled with a violent police state, that the protesters are fed up with how their government runs Neo-Tokyo? You don't need a manga to get that out of the film.
Police brutality.
Yeah, it's almost like it was included to drive home some point that Neo-Tokyo was a police state that warranted protests.
Why is the army arresting the biker gang just for being near Takashi? Especially when nothing comes of it later.
I don't know, maybe because they were a street gang that ran rampant throughout the city, causing destruction and violence in their wake, and that they might be a danger to Takashi? Just a guess.
Again, probably something explained in the manga, but how does Tetsuo all of a sudden get his psionic powers? Did they spread like a virus?
Again, this is something that is explained in the film. The accident awakens his powers that had been lying dormant and are seemingly genetic. He was most likely a late bloomer of his psionic powers and didn't become aware of his abilities until Takashi's defense mechanism triggered Tetsuo's defense mechanism. It's a viable explanation why Tetsuo didn't die in his motorcycle explosion caused by Takashi.
Long live the Freedom Revolution!
Funniest scene in the movie.
Wait, why is this scene funny? I thought police brutality was a sin.
Police brutality.
Wait, what?
Vehicle passes by and character is gone cliché.
Kei wanted to get away from Kaneda as quickly as possible to avoid being followed on her way back to her resistance cell. Since he wouldn't stop following her, she had to find a way to slip away from him. It's not exactly a sin to use this cliché because clichés are not inherently bad if they serve the purpose of a scene well. There's no way you can have her ditch this conversation without it being a cliché. If Kei were to merely become lost in a crowd, anime sins would probably declare getting lost in a crowd cliché.
I can't believe that there's a mole on the executive council.
We interrupt this production of Akira to bring you an episode of 24.
What, because they're talking about spies and political tact? This conversation isn't just a needless exposition dump either. It's meant to make clear that Colonel Shikishima is venturing into murky political waters and that he may be too brash to properly handle a situation with a mole in the government council. It lets us know not only about his character, but the greater challenges he faces within his organization.
Put your affairs in order if you want my advice.
So why is the Colonel in trouble? What exactly did he do, not do, mismanage, anything?
I know you didn't say it, but again, this isn't something you need to read the manga to understand. It's explained later in the film that the Colonel is facing harsh criticism from the Council for his department in psionics not yielding desired results and being a drain on the budget. This is all made crystal clear throughout the film if you could just chill out, be patient, and pay attention.
But maybe we weren't meant to meddle with that ultimate power.
You mean the power of a god?
But we have no choice but to grasp that power. Grasp that power and learn to control it.
Military tries to control unknown power cliché.
Except citing that cliché in this very scene undermines the importance of bringing up Akira's godlike powers. The Colonel ultimately wants to control the destructive power of Akira, harboring real fears that it's something we shouldn't tamper with, but have no choice in the matter now that it's out in the open. His dialogue is meant to represent a fear, but also acknowledgement of new technology, that it isn't something you can hide from, so you better learn to control it before someone else wields it uncontrollably. And unlike a lot of military officials in this kind of movie cliché, the Colonel considers if it should be unearthed as opposed to if it can, even explicitly stating that if the power can't be controlled, that it should be shut down.
Why is Kai randomly puking blood?
It's not random in terms of why he's doing it. The boys had just been beaten up by school officials, and a few of the girls are pawing over their battered men. Desperately seeking attention from one of the girls, Kai forces some blood out of his mouth. Just a few frames before the scene you're showing, Kai draws the attention of one of the women to have a look at his mouth instead of his friend who is missing a tooth. His friend then beats him over the back of the head. It's a brilliant bit of overlapping action.
Tetsuo is somehow able to steal Kaneda's bike. Either Tetsuo is good at hot-wiring bikes, or Kaneda is stupid enough to have left the keys in the ignition. Either way, it's a sin.
How is it a sin if Tetsuo is good at hot-wiring bikes? It's established from the very beginning of the film that Tetsuo is absolutely obsessed with Kaneda's bike, including all of its components. I mean, he even has the electronics active while he's ogling the bike's specs without Kaneda's permission. It's not exactly the biggest leap that a motorcycle street gang would know how to hotwire bikes.
Scene does not contain Oh. That's a sin on me and for this movie.
What kind of creep do you have to be to want to lap dance out of a scene where a woman is sexually assaulted? Notice how Anime Sins pulls back from this comment when Kaori is punched in the face by the clowns, and not when they hold her against her will and rip her shirt off. It honestly astounds me how CinemaSins replicators not only match the technical aspects of their awful videos, but even the gross nature of their sex jokes. I know the lap dance line is a catchphrase anytime CinemaSins sees boobies in a film, but this ain't the time to use it, Chief.
Another artistic masterpiece of a scene, but how exactly do these hallucinations work? They seem awfully spastic. Tetsuo hallucinates the ground crumbling beneath him, but in the next shot his guts fall out over a perfectly fine road.
The whole point of these hallucinations are to be disturbing and disorienting. Also, he's not experiencing a ghost-in-the-shell brain hack, he's losing his damn mind.
If the army knows Tetsuo's whereabouts, then why didn't they forcibly subdue him to bring him back to the hospital? There's nobody around, nobody would have seen it aside from the biker gang, and they aren't exactly reputable.
Tetsuo is dangerous because of his emerging powers, and they want to approach him with caution. It's not just a matter of keeping Tetsuo under wraps. It's about making sure he doesn't explode with his powers and kill people by pushing him too far. It's why the lead scientist is calling the shots on when to move in on Tetsuo, and why other scientists are the ones cornering Tetsuo to bring him in. They want to sedate him, not beat him up and haul him back to the lab.
More political unrest, but again, our background is missing. We saw something about a workers' strike in the previous scene. Did that have something to do with it?
The political unrest of this scene is different from the opening protest because this is a terrorist bombing by a resistance cell against the government, which is explicitly stated to pedestrians just a few seconds later. The resistance is a collective of activists who are outraged by how the corrupt government has transformed Neo-Tokyo into more of a police state with lacking leadership. You know, it had to do with all that police brutality that you kept sinning and then unsinning for some reason. This is all communicated through the language of the film, even if it doesn't tell you explicitly what the cell's exact political motivations are.
Random flashback is random.
Dude, these flashbacks are not the least bit random. We're getting a glimpse of Tetsuo's childhood that better illustrates his nightmarish jealousy of Kaneda that has been brewing since they were children, and why it's foremost on his mind, which fuels his rage and desire for power.
What did this monologue do, aside from possibly getting all these characters deadly frostbite?
The monologue is meant to showcase how serious the Colonel is about containing Akira, and that it may be fruitless with all this security. Akira, in his eyes, is a Pandora's box, an inevitable stage of humanity's cycle in death and rebirth that cannot be shut down. It pairs nicely with the Colonel's initial concerns about uncontrollable power being something that is inescapable to humanity, as though Akira is a force of God that can't be altogether halted or harnessed. You know, how he was talking about that in that scene you said was a cliché?
And I have had several reports. Reports on anti-government elements. How they're using your Akira madness to whip up their terrorist further. Then what about that Akira world renewal movement?
There are crazed cults everywhere that say the world is going to end very soon. What's so different about this one that it supposedly has governmental ties?
The Council is using dangerous association as a means to shut down the Colonel's project involving Akira. The cult is dangerous, and thus its linking towards the Colonel's project makes his experiment seem too destructive to continue funding. It's an argument for the Colonel being a bad image for the government and that he should be outed from his position.
How does this man fall asleep during this meeting that has people shouting and constant threats of violence?
Because he's old and tired? He's not even the only one at the meeting falling asleep. Also, have you ever been to an office meeting before? Even the most heated ones I've been to are absolutely boring if you have nothing to contribute. But what's more important about this shot of the Colonel's council liaison is that he is offering no help on the political front to the Colonel.
This discussion isn't over!
This isn't over yet, cliché.
Because it isn't over. The Council still wants to take action against the Colonel's position and project. They soon start assembling a means of shutting it down and arresting the Colonel. It's not an empty threat. Also, it's 4 words of dialogue. Calm down with the cliches.
This scene. There are too many questions about this scene to go into detail about, but rest assured there is a net total of 1 sin in there. I'll let you guys argue amongst yourselves.
Are you that lazy when analyzing a film you don't even bother to cite a sin and just declare one within a scene that you don't bother to take in? This is the biggest problem with cinema sins as a whole, that most of their sins are based on being bereft of reading film. In this instance, Anime Sins not only refuses to analyze what the espers are communicating in their psychic assault on Tetsuo, but refuses to even make a joke for a sin, the bare minimum of these lackluster videos. No theories about how the toys represent the personalities of the espers, no quip about the bleeding milk or the eerie soundtrack. Nope, just a weird scene you don't understand, and that gets a ding.
So it was the sight of blood that made Tetsuo go over the edge?
Again, this is what happens when you don't pay attention to a film. Tetsuo didn't snap because blood. He snapped when he realized he had psionic powers during his psychic battle, and that the espers have similar powers that could stop him. Tired of being pushed around, Tetsuo sets out to strike back at those who declared him a loser, or in the case of the espers, labeling him as a monster.
This sewer is ridiculously over-engineered.
I'm honestly surprised at this point that Anime Sins doesn't just say this line about over-engineering for every single location of this cyberpunk dystopian future.
Where is he? Where's this Akira? Tell me now!
Why would Kyoko tell Tetsuo about Akira if she didn't want Tetsuo to fight him? In fact, why challenge Tetsuo's ego in the first place by mentioning Akira was more powerful than him?
Kyoko is most likely letting him know about Akira so that A, Tetsuo may not run rampant with that power knowing that someone else can obliterate him, and B, to try to convince him that his power is too destructive and could result in the death of humanity similar to Akira's force.
Where's this Akira?
I won't tell.
Olympic Stadium? Underground.
How did Tetsuo know to read Kyoko's mind to find where Akira is?
If the espers could get inside Tetsuo's head and battle each other with psionic powers, it's not a huge leap in logic to think that Tetsuo learned this ability the same way he's learning, everything else with his powers.
All you're good for now is telling me where Kaneda's bike is.
Why would Tetsuo need Kaneda's bike? He just discovered he could fly.
Because for the longest time, this was the only thing that Tetsuo wanted, and not just as a means of transportation. Tetsuo was regarded as the runt of the street gang, and Kaneda, having stuck up for him since childhood, always treated him like a child who needed constant defending. Tetsuo desired authority, which in the case of his gang meant Kaneda's high-tech motorcycle. The bike was a symbol of power. It's why in the same scene Tetsuo is lethargic about finally acquiring the bike when he is more dominant than he could ever dream.
This scene makes no sense.
Not only does the scene make sense, but it's one of the most important scenes in the film. This scene, which is a bit slow, divulges why the espers may be another evolutionary stage of humanity, and that humans, in their current form, may not be complete. While it does slow down the film, it does provide breathing room to better explain what the espers are, and what their powers can tell us about our own place as a species, harkening back to the Colonel's beliefs that the psionic powers are not something to be locked away for all the security that they may provide. But I know it's hard to pay attention to scenes like this if you're only coming into anime for Dragon Ball Z fights and lap dances.
Mr. Omi and the others have been arrested in the coup d'etat?
There's been a coup d'etat?
Yes, that's right.
When and where? I get the feeling we missed another movie someplace.
All of this is in the film that you're watching. And unlike the political unrest or the esper powers, this information is explicit. Either you forgot about or skipped over the scene where the Colonel is confronted by the government, orders a councilman to be shot, and takes full control of the military forces to stage his coup. It's why at the end of that scene he orders for the arrest of the entire council. That's why the coup is happening. It's not random. It was clearly telegraphed and only seems confusing if you're not watching the movie.
Why would they need to keep Akira's internal organs and stuff at near absolute zero? What if they needed to take them out again to study them if, say, a scientist had a new theory and needed a tissue sample to test it? Wouldn't that damage the material further?
Because Akira is not being locked away for testing. He's being locked away in hopes of never being unleashed on the world again. They already have espers of similar powers to experiment with, and probably wouldn't want to risk unearthing Akira's destructive power again.
If Tetsuo can utterly destroy a bridge, then why didn't he just crush the APC that Shikishima was in?
Because the Colonel is not directly standing in Tetsuo's way. The attacking military forces right in front of him are. Tetsuo is also hyper-focused on getting to Akira, not murdering the Colonel. The bridge is just collateral damage on the road to his ultimate goal.
If his powers are so great that he can destroy that entire orbital death ray satellite, then it just furthers the question of why didn't he kill Shikishima?
Why do you keep thinking Tetsuo somehow wants to kill the Colonel? He just wants him to stay out of his way. He doesn't need to kill him, especially since Tetsuo can beat back on anything that is thrown at him. Also, the Colonel is the only one currently giving Tetsuo valuable information on the history of Akira, so he's probably not going to kill him.
You bastard! What did I tell you?
Scientist hides things that are clearly dangerous to the survival of humanity cliché.
The scientist was hiding the valuable information about Tetsuo's wave pattern matching Akira because he knew that the Colonel would want the project shut down before it got that far. The Colonel placed his trust in a scientist who is blinded by progress to note the dangers of letting Tetsuo evolve. You can call it a cliche all you want, but it's an essential part of the film's hubris in humanity's tempting of the power of God.
How does Shikishima plan to terminate Tetsuo? He's already aware that he's practically impervious to bullets.
Because the Colonel intends to reason with Tetsuo rather than kill him. It's why he approaches him and tries to offer help to control his powers rather than gun him down. The gun is for self-defense, for whatever it may be worth.
Takashi ex machina.
The definition of deus ex machina is that of a plot device, whereby a seemingly unsolvable problem in a story is suddenly and abruptly resolved by an unexpected and unlikely occurrence. The Espers and their powers are not unexpected. They've been present throughout, even during the third act when working through Kei as a puppet. Their appearance isn't unlikely, nor are their actions of stopping Tetsuo. They've been trying to stop Tetsuo throughout, and the only reason they haven't decided to revive Akira for taking down Tetsuo is because it would result in the destruction of the city and further loss of life, even their own. Now, ironically, Akira himself is a bit of a deus ex machina in this regard, but you somehow overlooked this. I know ex machina is a catchphrase of CinemaSins, but misusing this plot descriptor just makes you seem less intelligent for the sake of a joke.
So, was this how Akira destroyed Tokyo the first time? By turning into a giant fetus monster?
The very first shot of the film illustrates that Akira's initial destruction of Tokyo was that he detonated a massive singularity. The implication is that Tetsuo's mutation is different from that of Akira. If it weren't, why would you think the Espers would bother to bring back Akira to use his powers to stop Tetsuo? Did you really think they were going to fight a city-destroying bomb with another city-destroying bomb?
How did Akira rebuild himself?
The Espers did it. It's why they were concentrating so hard and letting mutant Tetsuo get all touchy-feely with them.
Your Frenchies.
Kids play the pronoun game with Kaneda, but luckily for us, he knows who she is referring to, meaning Kei. However, playing the pronoun game is an automatic sin.
How many women do you think Kaneda knows at this point in the film that it could be anyone else being utilized by the Espers? I know this film has a lot of weighty themes to ponder, but you should be able to use basic deductive reasoning.
More flashbacks that probably could have been used earlier in the movie.
I'll bet if these flashbacks were shown earlier, anime-sins would probably just think they were random flashbacks that need a sin. Also, the purpose of showing these flashbacks now is to illustrate why Kaneda cares so much for Tetsuo, making it all the more understandable why he rushes in half-cocked to save his friend, and all the more gut-wrenching when he has to say goodbye. The flashback is mere closure, though, not a left-field reveal of their bond. There are numerous clues to this childhood relationship throughout the film, including the flashback that you thought was just random for the sake of being random.
Because it has already begun.
Takashi plays the pronoun game so the audience wonders what it is.
Takashi already said this line earlier, like literally within your own video.
Someday, we ought to be able to. Because it has already begun.
The it Takashi is referring to is the death and rebirth of all things that allows for evolution. This fragmented bit of dialogue connects with Kei's monologue about the power of Espers being too much for humanity to handle, and something that shouldn't be contained. You know, the scene that you thought made no sense?
I am Tetsuo.
I am. Tacking one more sin onto this movie.
Alright, I'm assuming AnimeSins is willingly choosing not to address the final scene because it makes no sense and therefore a sin. The final shots are of the creation of a new universe, presumably the place where Akira has taken Tetsuo. As the universe is created, Tetsuo calmly states the final lines of the film, I am Tetsuo, which seems to suggest that Tetsuo will use his newfound realization of self to find a new and better life. A life where he is comfortable with himself as a being of great power and perhaps not live with jealousy, rage, and violence. It's the continuing nature of evolution that gives rebirth to Tetsuo and birth to a new universe. It makes sense if you think about it for a minute instead of trying to make a lackluster joke. So, what made me want to do this video? I mean, besides anime sins for Akira being awful, obviously. While I was at that convention watching Akira, I had two conversations in the room. The first conversation was with someone who was talking about how the filmmakers botched this adaptation of the manga by not including huge chunks of its many bulky volumes. Except Akira was directed by the manga's original creator, Katsuhiro Otomo, and it only came together because Otomo wanted full control over the adaptation of his work for having been so frustrated with them in the past. The other conversation was with someone who made a comment that you heard in the Anime Sins video, asking how the coup happened because they didn't see it coming. To then hear that same complaint in the Everything Wrong with Akira video was just surreal. Now, I doubt the person I was talking with had watched this Anime Sins video, but it does speak volumes to how often some audiences don't pay attention to movies and miss obvious information. And we can do better than this. We can discuss more about this film than merely making uninsightful jokes which not only lack in humor but are utterly ignorant of the film in question. We can think more critically about the films we hold higher up on pedestals than blindingly praising them for having more colors and more frames and more motorcycle chases. We should be doing more of that, and yet videos like Anime Sin send us back because it's apparently more entertaining to crack jokes instead of offering critique, regardless if those jokes are completely lacking in media coherence. Those three videos that I mentioned in the opening are great examples of taking a more critical look at Akira, and I've left links to them in the description. Now, defenders of this Anime Sin video would probably dust off the old CinemaSins excuse of the video being nitpicky satire. But the thing is, nitpickery doesn't work if those nitpicks are based on willingly ignoring huge chunks of the film that perfectly explain away these nitpicks. You could argue this ignorance is part of the satire, but that level of idiocy is far too layered to be considered satirical. To quote one CinemaSins commenter, "Satire isn't bankruptcy. You can't just declare it when you're losing." Now, there's already a plethora of videos decrying CinemaSins on similar grounds of lacking in critical thinking, so I'll try not to regurgitate those points here. What I do want to stress is how we should also be mindful of this thinking when it comes to anime as well. Anime like Akira are fantastic and a brilliant representation of the medium's full potential, that it's worth understanding why it is so revered, so that when another Akira comes along, we can recognize it and appreciate it all the more. But if we only see anime through the eyes of Anime Sin, we could miss it entirely. Now, all that being said, I'm not too worried about this video on its own. It has a considerable ratio, and the creator hasn't done much with his channel to capitalize on it. He only made a few more Anime Sins videos, and that was years ago. He's probably moved on to other projects, and maybe even just graduated out of Anime Sins. People can change a lot in half a decade. I mean, don't get me wrong, his video was bad, but at least he didn't turn it into a long-running series that would go on for hundreds of more obnoxious videos. I mean, after all, it would be pretty terrible if someone made a whole channel devoted to Anime Sins. But thank goodness nothing like that on YouTube exists. Damn it.